Hey everybody, Jay Average Vintage Collector here with another video. So today what I want to do is, since it's February, I kind of want to cover Black History Month. I think it's important to cover that part, and there's so many people that, could be chosen to highlight as part of, athletes that really have set the bar high or changed the game altogether. I'm just going to do a few of those today. I want to take some time to point some out. I've got, I think, a pretty cool showcase. So I'm not going to talk very long on this part because I do have a bunch of cards picked out. So without further ado, thank you for tuning in. We'll turn the camera around. Okay, so some of these guys, go without saying. We all know that they've had great careers, but just a few that I'd like to highlight. First and foremost, how about some Willie Mays? Willie Mays, everybody kind of knows what he did. And his career, and just a fixture. Might be one of the best ball players of all time. Willie Mays, 1965 Topps. As you can see, some writing on the back, but I'm not really too worried about the back. But 1965 Willie Mays. I'm not going to say too much about Willie because I think everybody is familiar with Willie. Moving on, next one we'll do Hammer and Hank, right? Hank Aaron. Here's the 1969 Topps. Hank Aaron, great career. There's his stats right there. I mean, we can see that this guy was just a monster. Held that home run record for a very long time. Just an absolute beast. Love this photo. Really like the old Braves logo on the sleeve, and just a great picture of him in general. So, Hank Aaron. Next few, actually, we're going to get into a few. I just want to talk about this one right here. So I chose to highlight Curt Flood. Curt Flood, not a Hall of Famer, but Curt Flood was probably deserving of the Hall of Fame. That sticker on the back is not what I bought it for. I actually bought this for $25 at a card show. It's one of the first, it was my first 1960 card and one of my first vintage cards in general. So Curt Flood, center fielder, 3-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, 7-time Gold Glove winner, 41.9 WAR, just over a little over 1,800 hits. Had a very successful career. Actually, in his high school outfield was himself, Frank Robinson, and Vada Pinson. So that is just an unbelievable outfield, and eventually they all signed with the Reds on top of it. Not most known, but a big part of what he's known for is that he challenged the reserve clause in court, went all the way to the federal Supreme Court. And pretty much the reserve clause was about when a player's contract ran out, the rights were retained by the team when the contract ran out. So there really was no freedom for a person to change teams unless they were given an unconditional release. He kind of challenged that. He lost, but and a few years later, it actually was overturned between the players' union and the owners coming to an agreement, which started free agency. It's pretty interesting. During his court case, testifying on his behalf were Jackie Robinson and Hank Greenberg, who were both in favor of trying to get rid of that reserve clause. And then others such as Dick Allen, Lou Brock, Sandy Koufax, and Don Drysdale also supported him in that. Surprisingly, a few players that were against it: Carl Yastrzemski, Lou Boudreau, and Pee Wee Reese. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But just wanted to, it's a good court case if you ever want to look into it. I know that some of those things can seem dry, but just looking through, it was pretty good stuff to wheel through. Next, Jim Wynn, the toy cannon. I picked him. I did a VR recently for Mark's Dodgers cards for 5 Hall of Very Good players from your favorite team. And, the Astros are my favorite team, so that applies to the Colts as well. Jim Wynn has had an exceptional career and put up some really good numbers. 3-time All-Star, only one with the Colts. 55.8 WAR, 291 on the home runs, and a 250 batting average, which is a little low. But he also had 225 stolen bases and a really cool nickname. So just wanted to kind of showcase Jim Wynn there. Next, how about Joe Morgan? And this, I love this card. This is a triple threads, which I used to really enjoy back in the day. There's the back. As you can see, it's numbered to 3, and I know that we talk about manufactured scarcity, but this one those cards I really like. That's a little older version. There are no triple threads. I don't believe triple threads anymore for baseball. But Joe Morgan, Hall of Fame second baseman, 2-time MVP, as you can see from that card right there. 10-time All-Star, 2 World Series, 5-time Gold Glover, 1-time Silver Slugger, 100.6 career WAR, which is crazy. 2,517 hits, 271 average, and 268 home runs. So just a fantastic player and cool card that I wanted to showcase. So the next one, and this is where we're going to get a little lengthy, but I thought this was a very cool set. This is the 1988 Conlon Worldwide Sports 1933 Negro League All-Stars. It's a set of 12 cards. I have the entire set. I'm going to read the backs of them, but you'll see that there are some really, deserving players in here, and I'm sure that names will ring a bell. So first is going to be James Thomas Bell, otherwise known as Cool Papa Bell. Cool Papa Bell lives on his own street, James Cool Papa Bell Avenue in St. Louis. He was in his own world as a base runner and stealer of bases. He even out center fielded Oscar Charleston as a youth, but Oscar had a bit of age on him then. By actual counts of white observers, one of whom was Leo DeRocher, Bell did not run on the bases. He flew over the route. He didn't have a mark on his baseball shoes at the heel. He ran over the ground, flicking it in strides on his front spikes only. Bell was as close to flying as humanly possible. At 43 years of age, he made a friendly monkey out of Bob Lemon by scoring from first base on a bunt. He also was 2 for 2 off the then Cleveland ace, Satchel Paige. Cleveland ace. Satchel Paige said he actually saw as Bell's roommate, Cool Papa, flip the light switch and hop into bed before the light went out. That's pretty funny. As honest as the day, Bell said Paige was telling the truth, but it was a slow switch. Bell did far more than just run. Even in Negro ball, he couldn't steal first base. He is credited with a 345 lifetime average. So there is the Cool Papa Bell card. And that's exactly what the back looks like. And I just read. I think the backs are pretty interesting for players that you may not be overly familiar with. Very cool set. All right, so next. Well, Oscar Charleston, who was just referenced in the previous one. Oscar Charleston was the greatest baseball player who ever lived. That includes Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Pop Anson, Babe Ruth, you name him. He hit both fastballs and curves with equal murderous power and placement. He could either single or homer depending on the need at the time. He could throw an arm that fired the ball on a clothesline. He caught liners and long and short ones with the added clownish ability to do flips and catch the ball in midair, or with uncanny judgment of ball's flight could walk measuredly to the very spot the ball descended. The fans were on the edges of their seats on these plays. Charleston could steal bases with a success ratio surpassing that of Max Carey, whose steal percentage led the majors, and he was more vicious than Cobb in undressing the baseman who tried to tag him. He was the chief cause for infielders wearing shin guards inside their stockings. Oscar would have owned most of the record book's pages had he been allowed to play. Oscar is the supreme case of blind prejudice. So there is Oscar Charleston. All right. Next up, we have Martin the Eagle. Martin the Eagle was the most versatile and skilled player ever to don a uniform in professional ball, Negro or otherwise. Babe Ruth, with his great pitching and slugging, was close, as was Bob Caruthers on the mound and at bat. But the Eagle was a great pitcher, great hitter, great fielder at every position, great base runner, best throwing arm of his time, and exceptional all-around brain power for entire game strategy. He also was as fine a man as you ever met. Buck Leonard, the first baseman extraordinaire and Hall of Famer, said, Martin lured me to come to the islands, which was Cuba, to play for his team. We had 9 sluggers in the lineup in my time, and Oscar Charleston was not in top prime at that period. The Ego was the greatest player and greatest man I ever met in my life, bar none. Martin had a great cackling sense of humor. Possessing that gem arm of his, he'd yell from the outfield to a cocky base runner, "You know run on me, boy, you know run." and that runner would stay put until a hit moved him around. But don't dare try for an extra base, you'd be a dead duck. So Martin Diego, Cuban-born player. All right, next. Andrew Rube Foster. Rube Foster was called Rube only because he beat Rube Waddell and the Philadelphia A's one Sunday in New York when the Blue Laws prevented Sunday play for the majors. Rube was an organizational genius as well as a crafty pitcher. He saw the itinerant black teams traveling all over the country in trains to exhibitions that often were canceled or the opponents didn't show up, causing loss of revenue and endless turmoil. He conceived the idea of joining the clubs, then independents, in a solid league formation and NL and AL divisions with regular schedules, regular pay, hard and fast contracts, and fines for failure to appear for a regularly scheduled game. This way, order was maintained and it brought play up to the level of the major leagues. Foster ran the Chicago American Giants, and John McGraw, visiting Chicago with his Giants, used to sit on the bench with Foster, learning the tricks the Negro League brought to perfection. Later, McGraw named Foster his official pitching coach with the Giants. He can be seen in team photos. So there we have it. All right, next. Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson was a large man, 6'1" and 215, but he also was the number one homer hitter, bar none. And he hit them the farthest also. He hit a homer halfway up a mountainside in Welch, Pennsylvania. From the bench, Buck Leonard said they could see the kids halfway up searching for the ball. He hit one in Monessen, Pennsylvania, which the mayor attending the game measured by municipal engineer's tape. It stopped at 575 feet, and the ball rested 30 feet further with no roll. At the Polo Grounds in New York, a groundskeeper who had worked the scene for over 40 years said Gibson's drive to the far left corner, top deck of the stands, the actual furthest point in the park from the plate, outranked any homer ever hit. I never saw one like it. We never got a ball so high and so far, never. As Leonard said, until he was injured, arm and knees, he could really throw the ball and was an excellent base runner, but he was no Biz Mackey or Bruce Petway, who threw Cobb out 17 of 19 attempts as a catcher. So there is Josh Gibson. Next, we have William Julius Judy Johnson. Judy Johnson was a classic third baseman. He could do it all with the glue glove and powerful arm, but more than that, he was a supreme team player. He'd do whatever was necessary to win by either brawn or brains. As Cool Papa Bell said, when you are named manager of the best team in Negro ball, the Homestead Grays, at the age of 29, then you have to be something special. Judy took advice directly from John Henry Lloyd to don shin guards under his stockings. Judy said Negro League base runners, led by the toughest Oscar Charleston, were so mean and ornery they'd cut you up as soon as look at you. They'd come barreling in, feet or shoulder first, knock you off the base, and get in safe. I have scars all over my legs. They've never gone away. They were so deep. The meanest would come at you, feet pawing the air and still thrashing until they cut you and ripped you aside. I saw the side of Ducky Medwick involved in Marv Owen in the 34 series and the uproar it caused. That'd be a friendly slide in Negro ball. So here is Judy Johnson. Next up, John Henry Lloyd. John Henry Lloyd was called Shovel because that's what his shortstop play reminded players and fans of, a steam shovel. He came across the shortstop post with both hands low, prepared for the difficult grass cutters. He was also in position to come up with an untoward bounce. When the ball hugged the ground, John Henry would dig in deep with his bare hand and glove, scoop dirt and ball in one shovel dig, and come up with the dirt and dust cascading from his hands. He'd wrap those long fingers around the ball, and it looked like it was shot from a gun as John Henry propelled it to first or wherever. He was hailed for his batting and fielding, just like Honus Wagner. Connie Mack once said, "If I had a big bag with Honus Wagner and John Henry Lloyd in it, I reached in and pulled one out, whichever it was, I'd be perfectly satisfied." Ty Cobb put the frosting on the cake when he said, "Anyone who thinks he can get to first base by hitting it to short with John Henry Lloyd out there is a damn fool. Lloyd was just as great a person." And there's Lloyd. I'm not sure who that is there with him. Some of you may know. Okay. Walter Fenner, Buck Leonard. Buck Leonard was known as the Black Lou Gehrig. Buck was built as powerfully, hit as hard and consistently, and was a great example of a clean living man as well. But Buck was a far better fielder than Lou, ranging much farther right and left than Garrett could. Teamed up in the lineup with Josh Gibson, the pair was called the Thunder Twins by the press, both black and white. Leonard could do the split for the low throws at first base with a ballet move like a Ferris Fane or L.B. Fletcher. I spent more time in Major League parks than our own, he said. We played in major parks when the home club was on the road. American League clubs were the kindest to us. Griffith Stadium every week with the Nats when the Nats were gone, and Comiskey Park in Chicago for our annual All-Star game. In the NL, the Polo Grounds, thanks to John McGraw, and Forbes Field, Pittsburgh, thanks to the Ben Swingers, and St. Louis, thanks to the Barneses, were our favorite. I was not allowed to play in the majors, but I was not bitter about it. I knew we were as good or better, but it was just that our time had not yet come. That is Buck Leonard. Next up, Dave Malarcher. Dave Malarcher was called Gentleman Dave because he took things in stride. Nothing rattled him. The Negro League's first college graduate, Dave played third base with his shin guards protecting his legs, and he feared no base runner, even though of slight build. He was elusive like a mosquito in your bedroom. Cum Posey, GM of the Pittsburgh Homestead Grays, said Dave Malarcher is the Negro League's #1 third baseman ahead of Judy Johnson. He was great, I admit, and the earlier Oliver Marcel. When you add his brain power, he's way ahead. Dave sopped up knowledge from the brilliant Rube Foster, mentor of John McGraw, and later John's pitching coach with the Giants. Foster treated Dave like a son. Malarcher, a printed poet, did the following on Ty Cobb. Tyrus, the fearless of the bat. Raymond, the fleetful of the base. The daring Cobb, whose skill begat. The envy of the diamond race. We honor thee in endless rest. We here enshrine thy deathless fame. The brilliant star among the best, the arch of baseball's thrilling fame. Dave Malarcher. All right, next up. Leroy Robert Page, otherwise known as Satchel Paige. Satch Paige made more money than the major league pitchers did. He was Negro Ball's greatest crowd pleaser. His cut of exhibitions put him into the high five figures when most major league pitchers were in the four-figure pay level. His trick of bringing in the outfielders and striking out the batters on 9 straight pitches was a crowd getter of sellout gates, assuring top pay each time he worked. Bill Veeck gave Satch a tryout with his Indians. He had Satch throw to a catcher to see how much of his fabulous control he had retained. Page told Veeck, "Put a pack of matches on the plate." Bill did, and Satch threw 10 consecutive pitches right over the matches. Page was 6'1". Page was 6-1 for Cleveland in 48, including 2/3 of an inning in the World Series, scoreless naturally. Page had to consult a dictionary to find out what base on balls meant. Before he hit the majors, he suffered a cold in his shoulder from a chill wind in Santo Domingo and lost his real fast fastball. So he won on guile. His famed hesitation pitch was the result. And there's Satchel Paige. All right, next, we've got Willie Wells. As this is written, and again, this was 1988, both Cool Papa Bell in St. Louis and Willie Wells in Dallas are alive and kicking, and Wells has more reason to kick than Bell. Even though Bell describes Wells as the Negro League successor to John Henry Lloyd as a shortstop, with a rifle arm and ability to cover all the ground Ozzie Smith ever could without the flips, Wells still has gripe. Wells has had his eye on a cute beauty in St. Louis, Clarabelle, but she was too young then for courting, so Willie asked her to wait for him. As soon as she was old enough, Bell stopped in and swept her off her feet. Wells came back to a wedding, not his, but Cool Papa's to his girl. Clarabelle Bell is still today Mrs. James Bell. Jamie and Willie are still pals, though. Wells took over the top shortstop role from Lloyd until the majors started to raid the Negro's talent. He could beat you 1,000 ways, but bat, glove, speed, and brains. Caribbean fans called him Diablo, the devil, because he was always in the midst of rallies that killed Islander chances for victory. Kind of a weird story on the back, a little bit different than everybody else's. All right, and last but not least, Joseph Smokey Joe Williams. Smokey Joe Williams didn't hit the Negro League until he was 34 years old, but he burned fastballs at the hitters with unmatched speed and control until he was 50 years old. He beat the NL champions, the Phillies of 1915, 1-0 with 10 strikeouts. He beat the crafty Hooks, Wiltz, Rube Marquard, Grover Alexander, and Bullet Joe Bush, 4 great hurlers for the White Clubs and the National League. Against major clubs, he won 6 and lost 2, plus 2 losses at the age of 43. Joe had a fastball that just wouldn't quit, as fast in the 9th as it was in the 1st. His curve fell off a table, and both the number 1 ball and number 2 ball came off the same delivery. As age crept up, he changed the crossfire and sidearm, which caused more bailing out than in a leaky canoe. As Lefty Grove said, "Thank God he's Negro. If he was white, I'd be out of a job. Connie wouldn't pay both of us." When Williams kicked his leg high and came down with that long arm and wrist whip, no batter, white or Negro, wanted any part of him. Russian roulette was a safer game. And there's that last one. So, pretty cool set. I actually won that as a giveaway on Whatnot, I believe, one time. But regardless of where I got it, pretty cool set. I believe it's fairly inexpensive, but it's got great players, especially if you don't have any, cards of theirs, even though it is a modern collection. But I hope you all enjoyed. I hope this was a good representation for Black History Month. If you liked it, or if you liked the video, please hit like. And if you'd like to subscribe, please do so. Have a good day. We'll catch you next time.